This is the third video in a series of 7 helping you get that A star in your OCR A Level Women in Literature Unseen essay. In this video we'll be looking at Plath's The Bell Jar. I'll summarise the text for you and provide you with key quotations in the areas of women and marriage, women and sex, and women as victims of men and/or patriarchal structures. I'll also include a very brief extract from an interview with a friend of Plath who was with her on the day she died. You'll also get a chance to write your own mini response to an unseen question from Mary Elizabeth Braddon's 1862 novel Lady Audley's Secret, and you'll be able to see my response afterwards.
Time now to delve into Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar. First would be my summary of this novel, followed by quotations.
The start of the novel sees the narrator, Esther Greenwood, in New York, having won a fashion magazine contest. She is with 11 other girls, and the group have a month to go to parties, fashion shows, and potentially make crucial contacts which could help them in their chosen fields. However, Esther is not having the time of her life, although she knows she is supposed to be. Whilst other members of the group are having fun with boys, there's Doreen, who ends up dating a DJ, Lenny. She finds herself lumbered with leftovers she finds singularly unattractive and uninteresting. As the month goes on, Esther becomes more and more disengaged with both the whirl of superficially glamorous activities and herself. She doesn't have the same direction or confident drive of some of the other girls, and feels that her mother doesn't really get or understand her. There's also the small matter of her relationship, inverted commas, with Buddy Willard, a good-looking, intensely practical, superficially wholesome, all-American guy training to be a doctor. He doesn't get her yearning for experience, for poetry, and her terror of being manoeuvred into a dull, conventional marriage. That said, when he asks her out following an uninspiring, lengthy kiss, she can't wait to tell all her friends that she, too, is following the expected, exciting path for glamorous young women and is dating a hunk from Yale University. Esther has a series of utterly unsatisfactory, intimate encounters with men in the novel. There's Constantine, whom Esther decides she would let seduce her, but who shows no inclination to do so. There's woman-hater Marco, who tries to rape her in a garden at a party. She punches him on his nose. And there's Erwin, a very well-paid professor of mathematics. She does manage to have sex with Erwin, uninspiring, painful of course, but then has a hemorrhage which requires emergency treatment in hospital. However, the majority of the novel focuses on Esther's mental health struggles and preoccupation with committing suicide. After an unsuccessful suicide attempt, an overdose, whilst hidden away within her cellar, she is admitted to an asylum. There are horrible patronising doctors, male in the main, and electric shock treatment, initially a horrendous experience. Her mother is an unhelpful presence in the background, uncomprehending, bewildered, slightly resentful, and a fellow inmate commits suicide. Esther's problem is that she recognises that the bell jar, that self-enclosed, trapped feeling of depression, could descend on her at any point in her life. The novel ends with Esther having a meeting with doctors. Will she be discharged from the mental asylum into the outside world? It's difficult to talk about the bell jar without mentioning the tragic fact that Sylvia Plath actually committed suicide a few months after the publication of this novel. Here's the voice of Plath's friend, Gillian Becker, talking about her death.
And in the morning, round about 8 o'clock, the phone rang, and it was Dr. Horder with the news that Sylvia had gassed herself and was dead. She killed herself in the small hours of the morning when she was always at her very lowest, and she certainly meant to do it.
Here's my first quotation from The Bell Jar in reference to the theme of women being victims of men and/or patriarchal structures. The Amazon Hotel was for women only, and they were mostly girls my age with wealthy parents who wanted to be sure their daughters would be living where men couldn't get at them and deceive them. The language here is interesting, isn't it? The aim is for the young women to be where men couldn't get at them. This phrasal verb conjures up animalistic notions of men wanting to paw at, grab, devour women, presumably in order to satiate their sexual appetites. The parents also worry that men can practice deception on their daughters, presumably get them to think that their intentions are honourable, when the truth is that they may simply want temporary sexual excitement and satisfaction. Of course, there is likely to be a degree of paranoia and being overprotective from the parents' perspective, but nonetheless, the suggestion is that young women must be wary of male behaviour, which can potentially cause them harm and or difficulties. If only dear Tess had had a mother who was similarly vigilant. There were no people I knew he would want to brag to about it, the way college boys bragged about sleeping with girls in the backs of cars to their roommates or their friends on the basketball team. In this quotation, Esther thinks about a possible advantage of losing her virginity to Constantine, an interpreter. No one within her circle of friends, competition winners, knows him, meaning that she would not end up feeling embarrassed or compromised by macho, locker room boasting and snide glances and smiles. The implication here is that some men can view sleeping with women as a competition amongst themselves. Who can notch up the most conquests? Such a mentality positions women as transactional objects, which can enable men to boost their standings and reputation amongst each other. It might be nice to be pure and then to marry a pure man. But what if he suddenly confessed he wasn't pure after we were married, the way Buddy Willard had? I couldn't stand the idea of a woman having to have a single pure life and a man being able to have a double life, one pure and one not. Buddy Willard confesses to Esther that he has slept with a waitress who pressed herself against him and wanted him. Yet he and his mother had previously talked about the value of both men and women being pure and virginal prior to marriage. Esther doesn't necessarily object to the idea of saving yourself sexually prior to marriage, but feels strongly that this should be the case for both men and women, and not just women. Such a statement explicitly challenges sexual double standards, in which women must remain miraculously virginal, whilst men are left off the hook, simply because boys will be boys. Of course, in Tess of the D'Urbervilles, Hardy similarly challenges such sexual hypocrisy, albeit far less explicitly. The reader bears witness to Angel Clare's shameful desertion of Tess, and can't help feel that such behaviour is ridiculously unfair, given that they both fell below their own standards by previously losing their virginities. And indeed, Tess was put under far more pressure to do so than Angel. Let's now explore Plath's exploration of women and marriage. That's one of the reasons I never wanted to get married. The last thing I wanted was infinite security and to be the place an arrow shoots off from. I wanted change and excitement and to shoot off in all directions myself, like the coloured arrows from a 4th of July rocket. Here we can see one of the changes in attitude from 19th century women in literature texts and those from the mid-20th century onwards. In Austen, for instance, marriage is crucial and entirely natural. In Pride and Prejudice, Eliza Jane and their sisters must marry in order to secure their future social and financial survival. Perhaps the state of marriage itself can be rather dull and humdrum, but this is rarely alluded to, and instead we get caught up with the excitement and will they, won't they of courtship. Even when Marianne marries Brandon in Sense and Sensibility, whilst we recognise that the marriage will be nowhere near as exciting and passionate as a union between Marianne and Willoughby, there remains a feeling of good sense and reasonable contentment to come. Not so with Esther in Plath's 1963 The Bell Jar. Esther wants more than the infinite security yearned for by her Victorian predecessors. She wants drama, action and adrenaline rushes,
something desperately hard to acquire within a respectable marriage filled with domestic chores to be completed. The simile referring to a 4th of July rocket demands a life of explosive energy and boundary stretching that is virtually impossible within the stale, sterile confines of a matrimonial bed and household. It would mean getting up at 7 and cooking him eggs and bacon and toast and coffee, and dawdling about in my nightgown and curlers after he'd left for work to wash up the dirty plates and make the bed, and then when he came home after a lively, fascinating day, he'd expect a big dinner, and I'd spend the evening washing up even more dirty plates till I fell into bed utterly exhausted. On the following page, Plath goes into more detail about just how tedious and tiring marriage from a woman's perspective could be. Whereas the man has a lively, fascinating day, the married woman is confined to the domestic sphere, yet, unlike her upper-middle-class Victorian counterparts, without any help to complete all the cooking, cleaning and housework. Her vision of wifehood is not so dissimilar from the reality experienced by Mrs. Durbeyfield and her Monday washing tub in Tess. She, of course, is of a class who cannot afford servants. So I began to think maybe it was true that when you were married and had children, it was like being brainwashed, and afterwards you went about numb as a slave in some private totalitarian state. In this quotation, Esther recalls Buddy Willard telling her, in a sinister, knowing way, that she wouldn't want to write poetry after having children. The implication is that becoming a wife and a mother sucks you dry of energy and creativity. There is no room or time left for any individual, passionate pursuit. The imagery is shocking and conjures up images of dictatorships and cruel, illegal methods of torture. In this quotation, Plath, Esther, goes further than saying that being a married woman can frequently be dull, tedious and hard work. The suggestion is that the institution of marriage itself is a broader immoral conspiracy aimed at denying women freedom and the ability to feel. Time now for some quotations on Plath's exploration of women and sex. Then he just stood there naked in front of me, and I kept on staring at him. The only thing I could think of was turkey neck and turkey gizzards, and I felt very depressed. Buddy Willard has just rather unsexily taken his clothes off, as a preamble to suggesting that Esther might well want to do the same. The reference to turkey neck and turkey gizzards emphasizes the unattractiveness of the male body, and by extension, physical intimacy without any kind of sensual build-up and or some kind of genuine emotional connection between the two parties. What I hate is the thought of being under a man's thumb, I had told Dr. Nolan. A man doesn't have a worry in the world, while I've got a baby hanging over my head like a big stick to keep me in line. This quotation refers to the centuries-old problem of the fact that after a man and a woman have sex, there is no physical consequence for the former, whilst there can be a very significant consequence for the latter. The novel was published in 1963, a period in which more effective methods of birth control were finally becoming available for women, including the contraceptive pill. Here, Esther is explaining to Dr. Nolan that she would like to have a contraceptive device fitted, so that she has the freedom to explore her sexual identity, safe in the knowledge that what she does will not have to shape the rest of her entire life. The phrase "keep me in line" is another particularly cynical comment about social structures, which implicitly dictate that women should be the primary child rearers, whereas men can continue willy-nilly, pun intended, with their lively, fascinating days and lives. I lay wrapped and naked on Irwin's rough blanket, waiting for the miraculous change to make itself felt. But all I felt was a sharp, startlingly bad pain. This describes the moment Esther loses her virginity to Irwin, the very well-paid maths professor. This moment is mythologized as something crucial, miraculous by society and people in general. However, the contrast between Esther being wrapped and naked
and the subsequent revelation within the next paragraph that all she felt was a sharp, startlingly bad pain is stark and demystifying. First-time sex for a man may well be lively and fascinating, but for a woman, or at least this woman, it most certainly is not. Even Tess being stirred to confused surrender sounds comparatively enjoyable to Esther's experience here. Time now for your third go at writing a single paragraph responding to a short passage. The priority will be your AO2 language, form and structure analysis and showing an excellent understanding of the key ideas within the passage. However, aim to incorporate one reference and quotation from the bell jar within your analysis so as to meet the relating your discussion to your reading concerning women in literature part of the question. Read the extract now, grab a pen and press pause. And here's my response. This passage consists of a deliciously satirical, detailed description of a lady of a household making and serving tea. Braddon goes into microscopic, eulogizing detail about the process and the effect it has on her beauty. It imparts a magic harmony to her every moment, a witchery to her every glance. The use of supernatural terminology such as magic and witchery, and later social fairy, in relation to something as mundane and everyday as making tea is clearly over the top. It projects a ludicrous, exciting edge to what is an exceedingly ordinary routine. Whilst there is no doubt that Lady Audley is beautiful, very pretty and innocent, and may look particularly beautiful when gracefully serving tea, the author seems to be satirizing the idea that women should somehow feel fulfilled and important confined to the trivialities of the domestic sphere. The notion that she alone has the key to the secrets of making the perfect cuppa, and that she is metaphorically weaving potent spells with gunpowder and bahia is ludicrous. Gunpowder can kill, and is associated with notorious plots to kill kings. Braddon also suggests that women serving tea can be seen as a witch precedent. Such imagery hammers home the utterly humdrum position of women within society and lack of any worthwhile power, especially in comparison to a president. The narrator of Plath's The Bell Jar makes a similar point about the mundanity of domestic life for women, albeit in a far more direct, non-satirical way. A typical day would consist of endless domestic chores, washing up even more dirty plates, whilst the man would be away enjoying his lively, fascinating day. Do discuss this if in the classroom, or spend some time comparing this to your own response if working individually. Press pause now to do this.